We all took kind of different perspectives on this, and when I talked to Steve Jagler about this, I had kind of this a little bit less reverent perspective than Blair did, and so I thought we'd all be up here in bathrobes, and we'd kind of talk fantasy camp, morning shower stuff, but anyway, could you stop the loop, by the way? I haven't started yet, so. And then when it goes, it just goes. That's my problem. That'll keep me on track. So what I think is going to be interesting for you is that we have three guys that have three different ideas, and for the entire metropolitan area, all three of us kind of ended up in the same spot. So with that, and unplanned, totally unplanned, by the way. So with that, if you want to start, and then I'm just going to kind of go through a rapid eye movement fantasy dreaming here, Developers Fantasy Camp. We're on our time machine. Here we go. Thanks, Steve. On a serious note, fantasy projects are important because they really force you to get out and say, let's look at something different. Let's look at something in a new way. Let's maybe come up with a different conclusion. And for Milwaukee, we sit here, we loathe about our winter weather, but in Copenhagen, which has the same climate, 80% of the people bike through the winter. They look at it differently. Fantasy projects help us stay fresh and unique as a community. The alternative is we could simply commit civic genocide like Dunwoody, Georgia, who's apparently adopted Walmart as their brand. Small Milwaukee, 70% of us are here, our entire lives, which maybe explains why we all did end up in the same general location. We've all been looking at the same problems. So as my focus is going to very quickly come down to the same area, West Wisconsin Avenue, actually, versus the Park East, same side of the river, west of the river. And I'm going to focus on the parts of the west of the river that are what I call the large attendance venues. The Bradley Center, the theater, the arena, the convention center, and the Grand Avenue, all of which work and rely on thousands and thousands of people to attend. And obviously it's not happening. In the old days, West Wisconsin Avenue was thriving. There were thousands of people day in and day out, and it seemed like a natural place to have these types of venues, and that's perhaps why they grew there. But as you go into the modern era, that has changed. Here's a High Noon, Wisconsin Avenue, OK Corral, no one in sight, right? I mean, there's no one there. How can you make all these things work? And quite frankly, that's why they're not working. So what we need to do is we need to start looking at this, and I'll start from an urban planning perspective, and it struck me that these 5 venues suggest this kind of 4th and Wisconsin strategy. So 4th Street and Wisconsin Avenue, to me, became kind of important from a planning perspective. And when I do that, then I end up with this development zone, and I begin to look at other ways that the zone works. Well, one thing that happens is that I realize that there are 9 hotels. There are also large venue, large attendance driven that are clustered in the area and have 2,292 hotel rooms that rely on those venues attracting people to Milwaukee. Parking is always the lost leader of development, so I looked at parking and I said, there are thousands of parking spots that serve this L-shaped area, but they're not connected, and it's not easy to park at the Grand Avenue and go to the Bradley Center. So some kind of connectivity has to happen. So then I took it a level further, and I said, that all seems kind of logical. So here's my strategy, and here are the roads. But what's happened? Well, in the past, these yellow arrows indicate other strategies. One was 6th Street, one was Kilbourne, one was Old World 3rd Street, and the most recent one, which is this Park East thing that comes across top. I'm saying to myself, have we just completely missed it? I mean, it's like the gang that can't shoot straight, right? We got 2 streets to pick, 4th and Wisconsin, and we keep on missing it. We keep on working around the borders of this thing. How can we focus all the attention where it needs to be focused? Because we need a lot of people. We need a lot of people all the time, or West Wisconsin Avenue doesn't work. And the Wall Street Journal, 2 weeks ago, came out with their article on what's wrong with the convention trade in the U.S. Space has increased 35%, attendance has dropped, and here we are in Milwaukee, 8 months out of the year with marginal weather. We are really a lousy convention destination, I think. We have to overcome that somehow. So we need an out-of-the-box solution. Blair and Gary said they needed that blonde's phone number, quite frankly. But what we need is a fantasy project. So we're going to get a fantasy project. So what is my fantasy project? My fantasy project is called the Milwaukee Regional Amateur Sports Center. It'll be a sports-oriented development that attracts regional and national club sporting events, college and high school sporting events, adult leagues, rec leagues, and tournaments, and will also serve community-based demand and serve as a mixing pot for our highly segregated community. And all of this will happen in the West Wisconsin Avenue corridor. What kind of sports do we need to support? We need to support soccer. We need to support lacrosse, football, ultimate frisbee, volleyball, basketball, baseball, tennis, and the list goes on. And here we are in a community that has no facilities. I mean, Milwaukee is so underserved, and we have this huge echo boom population that flies around the country to play ultimate frisbee. My nephew just flew from Chicago to Sarasota, Florida to compete. He bought 3 rooms at a hotel, three room nights, et cetera, et cetera. So you can kind of begin to understand why it's important. If I try to define a market area, I begin with a little circle and I say, but wait a second, I had a kid in club sports, where did I go? Well, I went well beyond the circle. I was driving all over the Midwest. And suddenly I realized if Milwaukee has the right facilities, we actually have an 8-state market reach. We can draw people from 8 states to Milwaukee if we have unique facilities. And quite frankly, as compared to small is beautiful, this is all about size. So Blair, why be small when you can be enormous? I mean, that's going to be my tagline for this whole thing. So here's an enormous dome up in Chula Vista, which has an interesting market reach. The Rockford Raptor Soccer Club has its annual winter tournament there. They're 118 miles away, and they ship everyone up there. The weekend I was there in January, there were 48 teams, girls high school volleyball. I talked to the manager. They sold 1,500 room nights. They had 48 teams. They had 3,000 attendees. January 15th, worst weather of the year. Everyone's at this frickin' dome in Chula Vista, and they're not in downtown Milwaukee, so they got to come here instead. And they got to come in droves. So let's solve a few things first. Milwaukee Theater, Blair, I agree. As is, leave it off the map, okay? Bradley Center, redevelop it as a basketball-specific venue, put $100 million in there. The arena, hockey-specific venue, put $25 million in there. Create the Wisconsin Professional Sports District, let the jocks run the sports, and the other guys can run the conventions, but put all the sports together. The convention center, we're going to move down to the convention center now. We're going to leave that as is, doesn't have to grow. That frees up a piece of land for me where I can create part of the Milwaukee Regional Amateur Sports Center. Pause. Now, let's look at this whole corridor along 4th Street. 4th Street on the right, 6th Street on the left, Convention Center on the bottom, Park East on the top. What I'm going to propose is to take the top 2 blocks north of the Bradley Center and carve that out for the Milwaukee Regional Amateur Sports Center. Leave the Bradley Center, leave the arena, keep that other block, keep the Convention Center. Those 2 blocks are going to be connected and provide me with about 10 acres of land on which we can create a facility that is unlike anything else in the Midwest. What is that facility comprised of? Well, on these 2 blocks, and the yellow line's the match line, so you got to move the right block down under the left block. But the red lines outline 5 specific sports domes that would be developed here. And those domes would be connected with these striking arcades, which I'll talk about in a moment, which really becomes the civic architecture. Those domes are big enough to handle a soccer field, a lacrosse field. They can handle tennis courts. They can handle basketball courts. They can handle volleyball courts, as you saw up in Chula Vista. And actually, if you put up 5 domes, which you can't find anywhere else in the country to the best of my knowledge, I can put 5 full-size soccer fields, lacrosse fields, 60 regulation tennis courts, 45 basketball courts, or 90 regulation volleyball courts under roof at any one time or in any combination thereof. I can draw sports teams, I can draw club teams, I can draw colleges, I can draw anyone I want to from around the country in the middle of the winter. And oh, by the way, if I do a really big dome on the Park East land, I can put in baseball fields. It's big enough, I've got a 310-foot fence line in left field. So what do these domes look like? Well, certainly we don't want to put up 5 domes that look like Chula Vista in downtown Milwaukee. The little ziggurat brick thing doesn't look right for Milwaukee. So, but domes are a very economical way to build a structure like this. And they come in all shapes and sizes and all types of construction. You know, and these types of large roof structures in cities like Indianapolis have become really good civic architecture. And in Milwaukee, in a way, you know, we have the Miller Park project, where a very economical Spancrete Industries, Doug, Spancrete panel system on the outside of the building allowed you to create a very nice enclosure or wrap. These arcades I'm talking about are really the civic architecture, the statement of what these buildings can become. And fortunately, the arcades are small in square footage because they're high in price, but they create a very memorable setting that people from out of town will recall and say, I want to come back to Milwaukee. What a great sports town. What a great place to have our tournament. So that sports and convention complex to the north needs to be supported by something else and vice versa. We have this Grand Avenue problem forever. We have this kind of knuckle in the middle of the two, that red dot, and we really want to take the energy of sports and push it into the Grand Avenue to hopefully solve the Grand Avenue. So I'm going to begin to look at that area that begins at 6th on the west with the Hilton Hotel, and let's kind of slice that up and see what we have to work with. We have the Hilton Hotel, we have the Secret Project on the corner, we have the Boston Store, the Grand Avenue, and we have Marshall Fields. Fortunately, the two ends of that are taken care of. Marcus has done a great job with the Hilton. Mark Ergens and Bill Ornstein done a great job with the other end. So really what we have is just this middle to focus on. So the first piece, the so-called knuckle development, I'm proposing a 3-story entertainment center with theaters, urban theaters, similar to what I've seen in downtown Evanston, Illinois, with a hotel air rights above that. That theater district in Evanston has totally revitalized that downtown area and has put tons and tons of people on the street, and it's an absolute natural as an adjunct to what else is going on there. It's a huge traffic generator and a great diversion for people who are in town over the weekends. It seems to be an absolutely natural place to have theaters where you have other large venue and large traffic events. Now let's take the Grand Avenue, and really, you know, the first thing to do with the Grand Avenue is we have to kind of detox it. You have to detoxify it. I mean, the first floor is retail. That's where retail belongs. Second floor, service and offices. Third floor and above, office, institutional, and residential. Don't try to throw retail all over the place. Bring the food court down. Make sense out of it. On the first floor, in that retail space, I would have an urban sports outlet center. I hate stopping at Johnson Creek. I hate stopping at Pleasant Prairie. Sorry, Jerry. I hate having to stop there because I don't want to shop at these stores there when I'm in Chicago or someplace at a tournament. My kids shop at all these stores. I want them to shop downtown. I want that to be a sports outlet center downtown. The Boston Store, I think, you know, even with the news this morning, you've got to prepare for the inevitable. At some point, a single department store downtown doesn't make a lot of sense, but a big box sports anchor or maybe some combination of other sports mid-size anchors could eventually replace the department store component and make sense in the mix. So the quick math, Judy, $50 million for the 5 domes, $125 million for the famous knuckle development, $10 million to re-tenant the Grand Avenue, $10 million to re-tenant the Boston Store, $100 million into the Bradley Center, $25 million for the arena, $320 million total, but I can kick the whole thing off with the first $50 million. And the beauty of using those domes is that they're very inexpensive. Now, I haven't figured out yet, and this is where, you know, I begin to wake up. I'm thrashing in the morning, the dreams are kind of going away, and all of a sudden I start thinking about a parade. I'm rolling in bed, and I'm saying, my God, a parade. We can use a parade. We can raise money. We'll have everybody march down West Wisconsin Avenue. And then I see the word bonds, which you can't see, but we can sell Midwest disaster area bonds. We can sell bonds. And then all of a sudden I just wake up. And I got a terrible headache, and the fantasy is over. And I just say to myself, I'm going to leave the numbers up to Mark Epley. He can do the whole thing for me. And that's it. Thank you.
Okay, Bob, I'm going to ask you a question from Twitter today. And it says, sports venues are notorious dead zones when unoccupied. Is there a big enough market occupy Bob's idea?
There is, because you have two markets to be met. You have a weekday market and a weekend market. If you go around the country, and any of you parents that have kids in club sports, and you have to go to Sioux Falls, South Dakota, because they have more soccer fields than we have here in Milwaukee, what a disaster that is. I mean, there is so much demand for field space. During the week, I have no concern about filling up 5 domes with activities that are scattered in parish gyms and all over the place. This could really be a tremendous draw. And on the weekend tournaments, you just look around the country. Go to the Chula Vista site and see how active that dome is every weekend. If they can do it in Chula Vista, we can do it in Milwaukee.
Say, Bob, who do we need to bring in as a champion of that first piece?
I think it could be combined with a sports district, and maybe I suggest that we should have this Wisconsin Professional Sports District entity, so that the Bradley Center isn't by itself. I think sports are a huge draw in the future. I think like conventions and trade shows were the past. The current generation, it's all about sports. It's all about health. It's all about marathons. It's all about triathlons. It's all about tournaments. These guys, if you're under 35 years old, you're spending a lot of weekends out of town doing that stuff. So a professional sports district formed that could maybe, and maybe it's just the Milwaukee Sports District, and maybe it's a professional and an amateur piece. If they have the same kind of taxing authority and the same types of benefits deriving to their benefit as does the Wisconsin Center District does through hotel room taxes and the like, I mean, they could be the catalyst. There's no reason why they couldn't be.
Thanks.
Just so I'm clear, are we talking about a new Bradley Center or renovating the Bradley Center?
I can't believe the Bradley Center is obsolete, and that's just kind of dumb Milwaukee Germanic thinking, right? I mean, it's 30 years old. How can a building be 30 years? How can a building be obsolete? So why don't you just take it, gut it, make it a basketball-specific venue, add some stuff on the outside, bring it out to 4th Street, engage it with the community so it's not so shut off. My feeling in preparing this was that you have to answer the question. So I just don't feel the need to spend a couple $100 million on a new arena for basketball when we have a big enough block where it is. That's a whole different discussion, sure. And I don't have any knowledge of what the analysis is. I'm sure there are some really good reasons why they think it's not worthwhile, but I keep that there, and I think hockey should be bigger in Milwaukee. The arena is such a great hockey pit. I mean, it would be just a great place for those two sports to coexist.
With that, are there any questions from the audience for Bob? I guess there's one there. Mike?
Just an endorsement. What you're talking about, parallel to that is what Indianapolis did with major sports, and I think was a major factor in transforming that whole metropolitan area. The energy that generated and the influx of people from all over the country and all over the world was a huge benefit to the community.
Indianapolis, in all my research, I don't share with you because none of that's very sexy. But Indianapolis spent $1.5 billion on sports-oriented facilities, which anchors their entire downtown redevelopment. It put Indianapolis on the map. No one heard of Indianapolis before it became a sports hub. And you're absolutely right, Mike. I mean, that's I think the power of sports to draw people to large-scale venues that are otherwise going to become obsolete and die a slow death. I think that's what we need to do. We need to transform. We need a big idea to do it.
Thank you, Bob. We're going to move to our final presentation, and I'll turn it back over to Dan Meyer. Thank you, Bob.